You're listening to the Mind Manual Podcast, Episode 4, Why Relationships Keep Letting Us Down. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mind Manual Podcast. This week we're going to explore why relationships keep letting us down. So what is it about relationships that leaves us feeling annoyed, frustrated, lonely, heartbroken, and the list goes on? Most people will quickly jump to it's what the other person is doing or saying or not doing or saying. But notice how all of that resides outside of you and your control. When we set up our relationships this way, we're placing ourselves in a victim role, powerless to change our circumstances because we're never really in control of what another person thinks or does or says. So it's all happening to us, and we stay stuck in being at the effect of everything that's going on outside of ourselves. In this model, we're totally reliant on what someone else thinks, does, or says. We are essentially placing our emotional well-being in the hands of another. So how is that going for you? Do you find yourself having to engage in mind games or tantrums, dishing out ultimatums, withdrawing from the other, or stuck in a stalemate of the silent treatment? And if the other person is able to be coerced into doing the thing they didn't really want to do, what does that look like? You may interpret it as love, but it's probably more appropriate to call it compliance and control, which never really ends well over time. Sooner or later, they're not going to do it right again, and resentment builds on both sides over time. You end up just playing your part in a role the other person has made up for you. These expectations that we create and expect others to comply with ends up turning into a guide for how to get the relationships to keep letting us down. The next thing that most people will quickly jump to is, how can we operate within the relationship without having any expectations of the other person? Aren't we meant to share equally in running a household or raising the kids and generally contributing to make everything work? It sounds like such a valid question or argument to make. And there's nothing wrong in planning out your roles together to get some mutual consent around all of the tasks and responsibilities and to-do lists, or in making a request of the other person. But when we lock it in as a job and they fail to carry out their job description, we go and make that mean all sorts of crazy things. We'll go and tell ourselves that they just don't care about us anymore. They only think of themselves. They don't value me, or they think they're more important than the rest of us. They're just lazy and I have to do everything, and we keep building upon these statements until we have a story that has us carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And it's all up to me, and they don't really love me, or they wouldn't do this or say that. And I just feel like a nothing, and I don't matter, and on and on and on it goes. Whereas in truth, they're just being human and getting it wrong sometimes, because we're never going to be perfect. They're just playing out their different values and beliefs. And when they don't match ours or live up to all of the expectations we've created, we go on a field day and create lots of stories, none of them good, and then we go and blame them for making us feel the way that we do. We don't see that all those thoughts and stories that we've just created are what's responsible for the emotions and feelings that we've just induced from those thoughts. It's a direct correlation between the thoughts that we're thinking and the specific neuropeptides and neurotransmitters that are released as a byproduct of those thoughts. This is how our body manufactures emotions. It's all an inside job. The other person has no control over what we think or what we want to make something mean. It's all on us. The problem is that we feel so justified in thinking this way based on what someone else does or says or doesn't do or say, that we fall for the illusion that it really is the other person who's responsible for making us feel this way. So we end up making the other person entirely responsible for our emotional well-being. So don't forget to add that to the list of their instructional manual or job description. This is just a recipe for disaster. You may feel justified, but you're also going to feel annoyed, frustrated, withdrawn, or lonely. And the other person is likely to feel unappreciated, trapped, and they just don't do anything right. And the result of all of that is disconnection. So what is the answer? The only way for you to control how you feel is by managing your mind. In choosing consciously and deliberately the thoughts you want to have and what you want to make something mean. This is where all your power lies. The quality of thoughts you choose to have about the other person will determine the quality of your relationship. So that's the good news. You are in control of all your relationships and how good or bad you want to make them. And although that may sound a little crazy to you, and you want to keep hold of making the other person responsible for everything that's going wrong in your relationship, have you really stopped to think how this is serving you and how it has you showing up? Other than the need in making them wrong and you right, is it really producing the results you want in your relationship? And is it who you want to be? Whereas if you were to acknowledge that it's only ever our thoughts that can induce our feelings and emotions, then we place ourselves in the driver's seat and we can choose deliberately with an open heart and become curious in seeking to understand why someone did or said or failed in some way without needing to make them wrong and assigning a meaning that limits or diminishes them, and then turns you into the victim by placing you at the effect of them. This way of thinking produces a reality that has zero upside to it and causes you to suffer. Which is more important to you? Thinking you're right and justified, but feeling miserable and disconnected? Or going with the thoughts that are going to serve you in order to induce the feelings of unconditional love and connection? This is how you get to choose your reality. Don't give your external circumstances the credit for making you feel a certain way. That can only ever happen from the thoughts you're thinking. And it's only you who ever gets to choose what those thoughts are and what you want to make them mean. We get to make our relationships as good or as bad as we want to make them by inserting conscious thought that will induce the feelings and emotions we want fueling our actions and behavior. We take back our power when we exercise conscious choice about what we want to make anything mean. Now, I know that all sounds almost delusional, but I want to show you how all of it is. Anytime we go and assign a meaning to something, so why not pick a delusion that creates a reality or experience that you want? Our mind can't take in all the detail of the world around us. And as we move throughout the day, it filters everything through a lens of thoughts and beliefs that we choose to focus on, based on what we've deemed important to be front of mind. This is called the reticular activating system. It's a bundle of nerves at our brainstem that helps sift through billions of bits of data at any given time by filtering out unnecessary information. This reticular activating system, or RAS, is the reason why when we learn a new word, we then start to hear it everywhere. It takes what you focus on and creates a filter for it. It then sifts through the data and presents only the pieces that are important to you that validate your beliefs. And so our beliefs shape the parameters of our filter. The RAS helps us to see what we want to see, and in doing so, influences the world you see around you and therefore the actions we take in response to it. So whatever you want to think and believe, your mind will always produce the evidence for you, which makes us think that that's just the way things are, as if it's just fact. But what really happened is that your mind has just produced a filtered sample of something to the exclusion of everything else. We don't see things as they are within their full context. And so this is the illusion our mind presents to us every time we choose to focus on something and believe something new. And our mind is doing this with everything, including our relationships. We'll go and take something someone says or does or doesn't say or do out of its full context and make that the sum total of everything they say or do. Our mind goes to work and keeps filtering everything else out to show you just how right you are. It doesn't even seem like there's any argument to be had with what's just been presented to us as our reality. We'll come out with statements like, oh, he always forgets, or she never does what she says she's going to do. But if you really analyze the situation outside of these absolutes, you would see there are many instances where they do remember or they do the thing that was required of them. Little do we know the reality we're experiencing is of our own creation, our own very illusion, custom made. So the idea is to create the thoughts that you want to have about your relationship, which will then induce the feelings you want to experience, despite not being able to control the other person or make them do anything differently in order for you to feel better. And while you convince yourself that it is the other person needing to be or do something different, you will forever remain in a victim role and at the effect of needing to control the world around you. This will leave you feeling anxious, exhausted, and constantly chasing your tail because you're never really going to get there and you'll keep trying only to keep failing. There is just too much going on that's outside of our control, and they're never really going to comply with the letter of your law. So if you want to step outside of this spin that keeps you feeling stuck and frustrated as resentment builds and you grow weary, we need to work with the RAS of our brain to focus on all the wonderful things about the other person and what they bring to the relationship or to the team, and why you want to make them the object of your love or time and attention. You get to create a new focus or filter for your relationships, and the RAS will start to gather all the evidence of what makes that other person so great. And this will start to become your new reality. The resentment will start to fade as you allow people to be just as they are, and you'll begin to show up very differently in the relationship, along with emotions of gratitude and appreciation in accepting the good with the bad, because that's just the nature of life and the contrast we have here on earth. This alone will begin to change the dynamics of the relationship. It can no longer stay the same when you change the energy, when you can truly embrace the law of opposites, that we can't know one without the other. We come to a place of peace in understanding. The question is, which side of those opposites do you choose to focus on? This will determine which reality you experience. Both exist and both will have a stack of evidence to support how right you are. You just need to work out which one serves you, which one makes you feel the way you want to feel and will take you in the direction you want for your life. We just need to work in consciously activating the reticular activating system over to the other side if you want to change your reality. Arriving at this place and learning to find peace and love in all your relationships is your work to do. Otherwise, you're going to be left with the need to control and change all of your external circumstances in order for you to be happy, which is exhausting and it doesn't work. The reason why you're not likely to suddenly find happiness if you could control your external environment is because you will still have the same internal thought patterns that focus on the side of life that keeps showing us a reality that confirms our limiting beliefs and perspectives. And so in no time at all, you'll begin to notice all the things you don't want or like, as opposed to all those that you do like and want and appreciate. This process of showing up in our relationships the way we want to, by adopting a mindset that focuses on the expanding side of life as opposed to a limited contracting perspective, is the journey of the Mind Manual podcast. And if you want to dive deeper and study some of the concepts I present throughout this podcast, join me in the Manifestation MBA, where we take a whole of person approach in mind, body, and spirit to become the next greatest version of you. You can visit themindmanual.com to learn more. Tune in next week for another episode of the podcast.